welcome to Crime Bytes, the show where we talk about some truly bizarre and disturbing crime cases. I've got Detective Scoot trained here. He saw me coming and he's like, hey, time for my bacon. Well, not quite. Anyways, my name is Liz. Today is True Crime Tuesday. Have you guys ever seen Silence of the Lambs, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, or Psycho? Well, they were all inspired by one man, and today we are going to talk about his story. Let me just reward my dog, though, because look at him. He's being so good! All right, there's your bacon. And I'm going to call you back later for more bacon and real truths. So, yeah, he's doing great. He's got me wrapped around his finger. He knows he gives me his cute face, he can get bacon. I gotta watch it with that. I don't think they should have too much bacon. Alright, but anyways, Psycho, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Silence of the Lambs. Oh my goodness. Great movies, but they were all inspired by one man, and we are going to talk about his story. But first, if you're a Silence of the Lambs fan and you're into crazy statement pieces, look what I came up with. Death Head's moth set in resin. And I've wanted to make these for like a year now. And I finally got comfortable trying to make it, and it's not done yet. And I'm not sure if I'm going to get like a full coverage or like a 3D effect here. I don't even know. You can kind of see how it's like wings are still flying. But stay tuned. Anyways, so hopefully I don't mess this up altogether because it's not quite done. Stay tuned. They're going to go up on my Etsy if and when they are successfully finished. In the meantime, you can check the link in my description. Crime20 coupon code is still active. And if you need any creepy oddity fixes, I've got 3 of these guys up there. So yeah, obviously these are one of those things, if you're really into them, you are, and if not, you're like, what is going on with this chick? Run now or pull up a chair, because today we are going to talk about the oddest oddity maker that has ever been. Arguably, at least. And maybe Scoot's gonna join us the whole time. We'll see. But let's start by meeting Augusta Wilhelmine Leherke, who was born on July 21st of 1878 in La Crosse County, Wisconsin. She was raised in a very strict and very religious household. Her father was the disciplinarian, and he would beat his children for punishment. Combine that with being a raging alcoholic, and it's just a recipe for disaster. And today we get to see this really get passed along for 3 whole generations. Who knows how back further it goes beyond that, but I think it's interesting to see how these things unfold. And you really want the bacons today. You gotta chill on the bacons. Yeah. That's it for now. We gotta save him for later. As she grew up, Augusta was described as thick-set and a little rough around the edges. In 1897, when she was 19, she would meet a man named George Gein. And George had a really sad history. His entire family had drowned in this flooding of the Mississippi River, and he actually grew up in an orphanage. She was attracted to George's quiet nature, and basically he was kind of easy to control. And he was attracted to her strength and drive, and they were both Lutheran, so they bonded over that. George dealt with his issues and inability to hold down a job by drinking, but would mask that while he was courting Augusta. The pair would marry on December 11th of 1900, and as their marriage progressed, George would fall more and more into alcoholism. He would end up getting violent with Augusta, and when he would beat her, she would always end up falling on her hands and knees in prayer. But she would pray out loud that God, please kill him. as he was beating her. And I'm assuming that we know this fun fact because their kids observed it. So yeah, not good. But let's talk about the kids now. In spite of this not being the best marriage, the couple still decided to have children, and Augusta was really hoping that she would have a baby girl, someone she could mold into a good woman. Unlike literally every other woman in the world, Augusta hated women, so wanting to raise a little daughter was kind of strange. But let's preface that because almost everything in this case is going to be a lot strange, and just get that out of the way now. Everything's strange. Just wait. So she would give birth to her first son, Henry, in January of 1902, and then on August 27th of 1906, she would give birth to a second son and name him Edward. She was really hoping Edward would be a girl, especially after having Henry, and apparently she did not hide her disappointment about him being a boy from anyone, including Edward. So that's going to help his development a lot. George would work mostly as a leather tanner and a carpenter, but he would struggle most of his life to find and keep work. Augusta had a grocery business that she built up and then sold to get them out of La Crosse, and basically ran a farm that she ended up buying in Plainfield. She was definitely the dominant one in the relationship, and she would make all these comments about weak men and loose women. But she was able to keep her family afloat despite being generally unliked for being just so harsh by everybody around her. So in 1914, she sells the business, moves her family to a farm in Plainfield, Wisconsin, to get away from the town that they lived in and all of its immorality. Henry is said to have done well in school, and he made friends, but any friends that Henry and Ed did make would be heavily criticized by Augusta. Ed would do all right in school, but he would get picked on by his peers for being shy, and he also had a lazy left eye. He would also do this thing that was described as odd, where he would just start laughing for seemingly no reason, and when asked why, he would say he was laughing at a joke that he just told himself. Oh wait, is that weird? Anyways, he would finish school when he was 16 and just keep working on the family farm. Augusta had ran the farm and had the boys do an extensive amount of chores to keep it running. She would host these daily Bible readings and sermons for them as well. She did sort of focus more on Edward, and she would baby him, and she was a lot softer with him, and he became a lot softer in his nature than his brother as a result. It's interesting because Augusta's marriage to George made her despise literally all men, and she kind of instilled into Ed this mentality that men were the weaker sex and women sort of had this power over them, and that these women, besides her of course, were vile and evil. So how wouldn't you get fucked up with that mindset? But more importantly, Ed didn't have any desires to become masculine or a strong man. He fantasized about becoming a woman. And in 1940, George would succumb to complications from his alcoholism, and he would pass away. When this happened, Henry and Ed would have to start working more on the outside of the farm as handyman, and they did gain a decent reputation within the community. Ed would also get into babysitting, which it wasn't, as far as we know, anything other than that. Out of all the things in this story, that was something that was not off. but apparently he related better to children than he did to adults, and it was something about their innocence that he related to in a not creepy way. At least there's not any evidence as of right now that there was anything creepy or anything bad that took place while he was babysitting. He was a dependable babysitter who apparently related to kids. But the boys were adults at this point and were still not allowed to really date. And Henry kind of went under the radar with a few ladies in town until he ended up with a divorced lady, and his more normal tendencies and kind of getting out there helped him to realize how really outside of that normal range his mother fell, and he started to become more and more critical of her. He would tell Ed that his closer relationship with their mother was unnerving, perverted, and unnatural. And some people would speculate that they had kind of gotten into a incestuous relationship, but there also isn't any real evidence of this. And Ed would say that he had never known a woman that way, only himself, and even that act he felt like he couldn't control, and it brought him a great deal of shame. So things would get more and more tense between the brothers as time went on, and on May 16th of 1944, Ed would decide that it would be a good idea to burn some of the brush by the marshes on their property. The fire would get out of control and the brothers would attempt to fight it. Ed would lose sight of his brother as they were going around trying to fight the fire, and would go into the town to kind of get some people to help him find his brother. And then he would lead the little search party right to his brother. Get what I'm saying there? Henry was lying on the ground that was burnt all around him, dead. But he wasn't burnt at all, and he had blunt force trauma to the head. So, all right, Ed. The coroner would rule that Henry's death was by asphyxiation and assumed that the blunt force trauma was a result of Henry falling when he passed out from the smoke inhalation, which this sounds beyond suspicious, but it also speaks to how quiet and mild-mannered and unassuming of a character that Ed Gein really was, because with all this evidence just staring them in the face, this was more believable than this quiet, mild-mannered Ed killing his bigger, more manly brother. That summer, his mother would have a stroke, and that would keep her bedridden for about a year. Just a few months after she was out of bed from the stroke, she and Ed would go to a nearby farm to buy some straw for the winter. And when they got there, the farmer was in the driveway and he was killing a puppy with a stick. I wish I was kidding. So they pull up and they're just watching this, and clearly deranged farmer is also, I guess, shacking up with someone he isn't married to. And she's on the deck screaming at him to stop beating this puppy, and she's wearing this nightgown, and that's it. And I guess you can imagine how thrilled Augusta was about that. But this is like the most wild thing. So the farmer kills the puppy and tosses his stick to the side, and his lover is running out and starts making a scene over the dead body. And I know if I was there, I probably would have been sprinting out of my car, grabbing a stick, and maybe landed myself an assault charge, because I just cannot with animal abuse. But Augusta was fuming for a whole different reason. She was upset that the woman was making a scene at all. The scene was that she was there in the first place. She was letting everyone know she was there in her pajamas, and she was going against her man. And she would call the farmer a weak man, not for beating a puppy, but for letting his woman talk to him the way that she did. And I'm gonna stop there, but these are the thoughts going through this lady's head, and she ended up having another stroke, and this stroke would ultimately kill her. So after his mother died, Ed was the only one left on this big farm in Plainfield, and things would really start going downhill. For one, he stopped taking care of himself completely and most of the farmhouse. He would end up leaving some of the rooms and things that his mother used untouched, sort of like a shrine to her, and the rest of the farm would end up looking like a full-blown episode of Hoarders, but Horror House edition, and we will get into that in just a little bit. In the meantime, Ed was also becoming obsessed with these morbid topics and death, and he'd get these magazines that focused on them. One in particular stands out, and that's Ilse Koch, and forgive me if I'm getting that name wrong. She was a Nazi war criminal that actually would select tattooed prisoners to turn their skins into lampshades. So that was the type of material he was kind of digesting and thinking about. And as you will see, if you don't already know, it made quite the impression on him. Then, one day in 1954, Mary Hogan, a local tavern owner, would go missing, and Ed had a little bit of a crush or something like that on her, because he would go sit at her bar and he wouldn't be able to stop staring at her. And she kind of ended up taking pity on him and let him hang around as long as he didn't cause any trouble. And when she disappeared, they found a small pool of blood there in the bar and a trail of blood that led out to the parking lot and the shell casing, but nothing more, and the case kind of ended up just going cold. One guy would even make a joke with Ed and say that if he was a little bolder, maybe Mary would be back at his house making him a sandwich instead of being missing, and Ed responded with a laugh and said that this guy has it all wrong. She was back at the house, which seemed kind of in bad taste, but they all kind of left it at that because Ed was just a little off. Then on November 16th of 1957, Berniece Worden's son would go down to meet his mother at the hardware store where they worked together, and at first he wasn't all that concerned when he didn't see her right away. But then he saw a pool of blood and like another trail of blood leading from the pool to the back door. He would call the police and show them the last receipt in the till. It was a gallon of antifreeze sold to Ed Gein. So the police would come down to Ed's property and they would go to the shed where they thought Ed had a deer hanging up at first because it was either the first or second day of deer season, but no, it was not a deer, it was Berniece Worden. And she was hung just like a deer in Ed's shed. And apparently, after Ed had bought the antifreeze, he asked her to see one of the .22 rifles, and he had a .22 bullet in his pocket that he just slipped in. And when she turned around, he raised the rifle and shot her with it. He would decapitate her, put nails in her ears, and like a string through the nails so it would hang like a decoration. And he didn't have time to actually hang it yet, but he also completely gutted her, and her heart was near a stove. And there's no evidence that he ever ate anyone, but was he going to start trying? The rest of what they would find, I mean, it's like a creative horror show, taxidermy of the illegal nature. So viewer discretion, again, I will have to say is advised, because I'm going to describe the things that they found after they found poor Berniece, and I'll post a few pictures where I can as well, because they're out there. And guys, don't listen or look if you can't handle it. It is wild. So they would find 9 human skin face masks and 10 females' heads with the top sawed off, human skin chairs and lampshades. One of the lampshades had a face. Remember that Nazi war criminal? He was like extreme, let me DIY this. So he had different collections also in shoeboxes, noses, lady parts, nipples. He had a whole belt made of nipples where, why? I can see how, but sir, how does one... He had skulls on his bedposts and skulls that he would use for bowls in his kitchen and silverware fashioned from bones. He had lips sewn to his curtains. Lips. They would also find Mary Hogan's head in a paper bag, proving that she was, in fact, back at Ed's house. So wild. The good news is that as far as we know, Mary and Berniece were the only women that we know for sure that Ed Gein murdered. He killed both of them by shooting them, basically to use their bodies for different purposes. Because the other things they would find along with those face masks were bodysuits made with human skin. One female shirt type thing had actual breasts on it because Ed literally wanted a sex change. More specifically, he wanted to be his mother or as much like her as possible. So, yeah, Silence of the Lambs. Anyhow, he didn't kill these people. That's the good news, because he would go and visit the local graveyards, usually with a friend of his who worked there, and they would dig up bodies, and Ed would take parts and then bury whatever he didn't use, kind of undisturbed or seemingly undisturbed. So police would dig up some of these graves and confirm that Ed did in fact do this. And so they didn't do all the graves. I mean, why would you if a few of them turned out exactly as the man said that they would? Ugh. Why would you do all of them? And apparently he may have dug up his mother's head first so that he could keep it. Although there are a few sources that say that he couldn't do this because of some cement there or something. I've seen a little of both, so I'm not sure. I think both options would make sense in a sick, weird way. He would, however, look for recently buried women who resembled his mother, and apparently he would dance around his house and sometimes even in the cemetery under a full moon in his human skin outfits. So... yeah, that's what they found, and when they brought Ed in, he would confess, but this confession would be deemed inadmissible when an officer would ram his head into a wall. On November 21st of 1957, Gein was arraigned on 1 count of first-degree murder, and he entered a not guilty plea. He said that he was not guilty because he was insane, and I mean, he had a pretty good argument, and he was in fact found incompetent to stand trial and was sent to a hospital for the criminally insane. They would determine after a few transfers that he was in fact sane enough to stand trial, and on November 14th of 1968, his trial would begin. He was found guilty of first-degree murder, but also found to be insane, so he spent the rest of his life in a institution. He was officially diagnosed with schizophrenia. He was said to be a model patient, and he would take to rug making and stone polishing. He loved crafts. He would stare at the female staff, but didn't act like he was mentally ill beyond that, if that makes any sense. And he would die on July 26th of 1984 at the age of 77 from cancer. On March 20th of 1958, while his estate was being auctioned, everything just burned to the ground. And everyone, including Gein, would say that it was just as well. and his car was auctioned off and ended up being in a traveling carnival where the new owner would charge people 25 cents to view it. Gein would be buried next to his mother after he passed, and his headstone would end up being vandalized bit by bit until ultimately it was completely stolen and has never been replaced. Gein, however, as far as we know, is still resting next to his mother with or without her head. I think we can say for sure that Gein killed his brother, Mary, and Berniece, but was that really it? There are a few other people who had gone missing, and that were always a question. 2 male hunters and 2 girls aged 8 and 15 who were also never found. Although all of the parts and remains at the Gein household were of older ladies, so although he can loosely be tied to these missing people, the general consensus is that he probably didn't have a part in these disappearances, but you never know. Alright guys, that's gonna do it, but let's bring Detective Scoot Dog back out for this week's Real Fact. Hey Scooter, I got bacons. Oh man. Oh, he's here. Look how quick, he's such a good learner. All right, baby. Get on the camera again. Come on over. He loves these frickin' bacons. All right. All right. Here we go. I don't know. This one, I don't know where I heard it first. It's been a few times. Come on, Scooty, this past week. And it is that wherever you go, there you will be. There you are. Wherever you go, there you are. So be it a good thing or be it a bad thing, you know? And for this week's positive note, I don't know if any of you all get that seasonal affect disorder. This week was frigid, and I have family, and I like Massachusetts, but I don't like the winter at all. And I don't know, maybe we will look at a crime together where there's an element of that. Would that interest you guys at all? I don't know. Anyways, for the insane movies that Ed Gein inspired, I think it's good that he only killed 2, well, probably definitely his brother too. So 3 people. It seemed way worse at first, and I thought that, I don't know, it was terrible and horrible, but I guess it could have been way worse for the type of movies that this man did inspire. And they probably would have gotten way worse if they didn't stop him either. But, and this is weird too, but do you guys ever look at a bizarre person and find out you have more in common with them than you'd like to admit? Like, I was raised in a town called Plainfield by my religious mother. Plainfield, Massachusetts though, but I like my weird crafts and yeah. But we'll be back next week, and can you believe it's only 15 days until Christmas? I want to do some Christmas themed shows, so get ready, and I'll see what I can come up with. Maybe a bad Santa. Anyhow, Ed Gein inspired Silence of the Lambs, and here is a case where our killer was inspired by the fictional character Dexter. So go ahead and check that one out if you are a Dexter fan. And until next week, please stay safe out there. Bye.